Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we are tackling, really, a core mission. We're going to analyze the psychological and even the neurological mechanisms that we all have to navigate challenges, recover from crisis.
And ultimately thrive.
Exactly. And this isn't about, fluffy feel-good ideas. We're exploring the raw, hard science of inner strength. So things like resilience, radical self-care, and the profound power of self-compassion.
Exactly. Our goal is to really pull back the curtain on the systems that allow us to endure. We want to move beyond the common wellness cliches and instead give you a deeper understanding of the hard science, from cognitive frameworks like coherence and the VUCA model, all the way to the neurobiology of stress, so you can actively enhance your inherent capacity for well-being. This knowledge isn't theoretical.
Wow.
It's designed to give you tools that are literally wired into your physiology, just waiting to be activated.
Okay, let's unpack this. Before we get into the brain science, I think we need a really clear definition. What does resilience actually look like in action? And why is developing this internal infrastructure so critical for navigating, the increasing complexity of our world?
Right. So to start with a formal definition, resilience is fundamentally the capacity of a dynamic system.
It is you, the individual.
It's you, the individual, exactly. It's the capacity to successfully adapt to disruption and stress that threatens your function or your viability or even your development. And it's crucial to note that resilience isn't about remaining static. It's not about being untouched by the world.
It's not an armor.
No, it's an active process of adaptation. It's what allows you to bend without shattering and ultimately to recover your equilibrium.
I find that definition of a dynamic system really helpful because it emphasizes movement and flexibility. It tells us that strength isn't about being rigid like iron, but maybe more like carbon fiber. It implies there's an action required.
And that's precisely why visualizing resilience through metaphors can help make this abstract concept so much more tangible.
If you can picture it, you can train it.
Exactly. We see different qualities of resilience represented by different images.
Okay, so let's start with maybe the simplest recovery mechanism, that bounce back quality.
That's perfectly embodied by the roly-poly toy, you know the one?
Yeah.
In German, it's known as the Staufmännchen, the little standing-up man. No matter how hard you push it, that weighted base ensures it always rights itself. This toy illustrates the pure bounce-back mechanism.
So you get knocked down by a crisis.
A job loss, a personal betrayal, a market crash, whatever it is. But your dynamic system quickly and automatically returns to its psychological baseline. It's that immediate recovery.
But recovery isn't the only kind of strength. I mean, sometimes you need to survive the storm while it's still raging.
That's where the metaphor of bamboo comes in.
Aye.
Bamboo speaks directly to elasticity and flexibility. When it's faced with a fierce wind, a powerful, sustained stressor, the bamboo doesn't fight it. It bends deeply, sometimes dramatically, under the strain.
But it doesn't break.
Because it's elastic, the structure itself does not break. It concedes ground temporarily, waits for the stressor to pass, and then using its own internal tension, it just springs back upright.
So that teaches us that adaptation often requires a willingness to yield, to not be so rigidly strong, because that rigidity is often what causes the snap.
Precisely. And then there's the ultimate metaphor for deep adaptability, the Rose of Jericho.
Sometimes called the resurrection plan. This one really speaks to psychological endurance, especially when resources are scarce.
That plant is the true symbol of deep, almost extreme survival capacity. The Rose of Jericho grows in dry regions, and when droughts hit, it completely dries out. It curls into a tight, brown, seemingly lifeless bundle.
And it can stay like that for years.
For years. It can resist extreme desiccation, environmental stress. But the moment it detects water, it rehydrates, unfolds, and revives, starting to green and grow within hours.
Wow.
Psychologically, this illustrates profound endurance. It's the ability to maintain your core identity, your viability, even when external resources like social support, money, energy are completely dried out.
The capacity to revive is always retained.
Always.
It's just fascinating that survival isn't always about fighting. Sometimes it's about going dormant until resources return. And we have other symbols too, right? Like the chameleon, which represents perfect environmental adaptation.
Or even the cockroach.
Less poetic, maybe.
A little less poetic, yeah. But it represents that raw, obstinate ability to just push through and survive under intensely adverse conditions.
So all these images tell us that resilience is active, it's adaptive, and it's multifaceted.
And we require all these facets now more than ever because the complexity of our modern environment forces us outside of our comfort zones constantly. This environment is often described using a military strategy framework.
VUCA.
VUCA.
The VUCA framework, volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. It came from the U.S. military to describe the post-Cold War world, but wow, it has become the perfect lens for modern life, hasn't it?
It really has. It's the background noise of our lives.
Yeah.
So let's break those four elements down because they show precisely why trained resilience is non-negotiable today. B stands for volatility,
Right, so the speed and scale of change.
the speed, scale, and unpredictability of change. Think of a digital marketplace where one small event, a random social media post, a minor supply chain disruption, can have massive cascading global impacts overnight.
And that velocity leads directly to you, which is uncertainty.
Mm-hmm.
Because the world moves so quickly, calculating or predicting the future becomes exponentially harder. We lose the ability to plan long-term with any real confidence.
Exactly. You can have the most detailed 5-year business plan, but if a pandemic hits or an AI breakthrough changes your entire industry in 6 months.
That plan is obsolete. You're constantly operating with partial information.
Which brings us to C, for complexity. This is that feeling of being overwhelmed by specialization. We live in this highly specialized world with just overwhelming amounts of information, tangled systems, and often too many overlapping rules.
Just think about the cognitive load of navigating health insurance or filing your taxes.
It's immense. It demands significant cognitive endurance just to maintain function.
And finally, A is for ambiguity.
Right. This means things are less clearly defined. The cause and effect relationship is murky. The old, established solutions and templates that worked for previous generations, they just don't fit the new problems we face.
We're forced to create unique solutions in real time for problems that have no precedent.
So you put it all together. Imagine your Monday morning. You wake up to volatility from a market shift. You face uncertainty about your job, you grapple with the complexity of some bureaucracy, and you deal with ambiguity from a vague new mandate from your boss.
That's a lot.
It is. And resilience becomes truly relevant only when we are pushed outside our usual comfort zone by this VUCA environment.
That brings up a really fundamental question that I think a lot of people have. How much of this adaptability is genetic, and how much can we actually control? There's this persistent idea that resilience is innate. You either have that tough wiring or you don't.
And that narrative is just inaccurate. The research is profoundly encouraging here. The fundamental belief we have to start with is that every person is inherently resilient. We're all designed to survive, but the capacity is distributed.
So researchers estimate that about 50% of our capacity for resilience is relatively stable.
Yes, what's sometimes called raw resilience.
The baseline, determined by our history.
Exactly. This 50% is hard to change. It's determined by foundational factors like genetics, epigenetics, prenatal stress exposure, and especially those early life experiences related to attachment and socialization.
A secure childhood can build a higher starting point for that raw resilience.
It often does.
But that means there's a massive, actionable window of opportunity. The other half is available for training.
Absolutely. The other 50% can be actively strengthened and trained through conscious effort, learning, and practice throughout your entire lifetime. You can consciously build mental muscle just as you would physical muscle.
And that's really what the rest of our deep dive is about, right?
Yeah.
Figuring out the training plan for that other 50%.
Yes. But to build the muscle, we first need to understand the resistance. We need to understand the immediate enemy, which is stress.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because we need to discuss the immediate physical and neurological response to stress. It's a brilliant, life-saving evolutionary mechanism that, in the context of this VUCA world, often sabotages our performance and our sense of self.
That is the core conflict. Stress evolved as a short-term emergency response. If you were face-to-face with an immediate, acute threat, say, a predator, this mechanism was essential for survival. In that moment, the body instantly shifts into the highest state of alert readiness.
And the physical response is just this coordinated systemic dump of resources.
Yes. Your sympathetic nervous system takes over. Breathing accelerates. Your heart rate and blood pressure soar to circulate blood quickly. And critically, stress hormones, adrenaline, noradrenaline, cortisol, are dumped into your bloodstream.
For extra energy.
For extra energy, to suppress processes that aren't immediately life-saving, like digestion, and even to reduce pain perception. The body is completely optimized for either fight or immediate flight.
That level of preparedness is perfect for running from that ancient threat, but it is utterly detrimental for a modern threat,
Mm.
like solving a complex software bug under pressure or trying to have a nuanced negotiation. And that brings us to the critical neurological conflict, the brain battle that happens when high stress takes over.
Right. We have two primary functional networks competing for resources in the brain during high stress. The first is the limbic system, which is our emotional core, and within that system we have the amygdala,
The brain's smoke detector.
the smoke detector or alarm system. When stress hits, the amygdala springs into action instantly, demanding attention and taking the lead.
And the critical detail about the amygdala is that once it's activated, it operates without a built-in safety switch. It doesn't have an overheating protection mechanism.
Just keeps running the alarm, telling the system, danger,
That's
danger.
mm.
Now, you contrast that with the prefrontal cortex, the PFC, that's located right behind your forehead.
Our control system, the executive function.
Exactly. It's responsible for rational thought, for complex planning, for nuanced decision-making, and critically, for emotional regulation.
So if the amygdala is the alarm system, the PFC is essentially the brain's CEO or operations manager. It's the part we need most for those VUCA challenges.
Precisely. It's the source of your complex coping strategies. But here's the neurological vulnerability. When the stress level becomes too high, the amygdala, being the primal alarm system, effectively sidelines the PFC.
It's a triage decision.
It's a rapid evolutionary triage decision. Blood and energy are diverted to motor functions and the limbic system, and the PFC functionally shuts down.
The CEO gets sent home because the building is on fire?
Exactly. And the consequence of this PFC suppression is what we call competence amnesia.
Ah.
You suddenly lose access to your established resources, your detailed knowledge, and your complex coping skills, the very things you have trained for and need to manage the situation.
Like freezing during a public presentation, or blanking completely on a crucial argument during a confrontation.
Yes. You know the information is in there, but you can't access that high-level function because the emotional alarm system is driving the bus.
That provides enormous context for human error under pressure. When we freeze or react irrationally in a crisis, it's not a personal failure. It's a neurobiological state change. Our most sophisticated control systems are temporarily offline.
It is the amygdala dominating. And while that acute response is useful for brief threats, the major problem in modern society is the chronic nature of stress.
Right, we're constantly triggering that ancient emergency mechanism while just sitting at a desk.
Which leads us to the concept of hormesis.
Hormesis, the principle that the dosage determines the effect, or metaphorically, the dosage makes the poison.
Correct. It's a biological principle. It states that low, manageable levels of an otherwise harmful stressor can actually have positive, strengthening effects. Think of it like controlled exposure training. A brief, controlled amount of stress follows the hormetic curve. It strengthens our defense mechanisms and makes us more resistant to higher burdens in the future.
Like exercise. A brief, intense strain damages the muscles slightly, but the recovery makes it stronger.
Precisely. Or a mild fever helps your immune system learn and adapt. Short-term, controlled stress gives us the resources we need to adapt and overcome challenges. But the moment that stress becomes chronic, sustained, and without adequate periods of regeneration, the benefit reverses entirely.
And we enter that state of permanent alarm readiness.
Yes. When we experience sustained psychological burden, from a toxic work environment, a difficult relationship, constant pressure, the body is constantly producing high levels of cortisol. And cortisol is designed to clear sugar reserves for energy and suppress the immune system temporarily. But if that mechanism is sustained, this chronic high-level activation accelerates disease, causes systemic inflammation, and severely impairs mental and physical well-being.
The life-saving mechanism becomes a disease-accelerating mechanism.
It does.
So the body is perpetually running a marathon without ever crossing the finish line, which means it never gets a chance to recover or repair. That shifts the entire focus of our strategy, doesn't it? We have to stop asking, how do I fight the disease, pathogenesis, and start asking, how do I cultivate the health that prevents the system from failing in the first place?
That perspective change is foundational. We shift our view from pathogenesis, what causes disease, to salutogenesis, which is the study of what creates and maintains health. This concept was pioneered by the medical sociologist Aaron Antonovsky.
And I think this is where traditional medicine often focuses too heavily. It's all about minimizing risk factors, managing symptoms, understanding what makes us sick. Salutogenesis forces us to look in the opposite direction.
It asks a different question. Why do some people exposed to the same massive stressors remain fundamentally healthy? It's a health-focused paradigm. We stop focusing purely on managing illness or avoiding risk, and we start deliberately focusing on health-supporting protective factors and our inner resources.
It's a completely different mental posture toward well-being.
Completely. And the key mechanism Antonovsky identified for remaining strong and flexibly activating resources during challenges is what he called the sense of coherence, or SOC.
So a strong SOC essentially means you feel like you have an overall handle on your life, even when the details are chaotic or stressful.
A high sense of coherence is the protective armor against the chronic stress of the VUCA world. It allows you to quickly gauge a situation, access your tools, and activate resources to meet life's demands. And Antonovsky found that the SOC comprised of three critical interrelated components. They're like blueprints for mental strength.
The first pillar is comprehensibility.
Comprehensibility is the feeling that events in life are understandable, structured, and predictable. When something chaotic happens, you feel that you can mentally grasp the situation.
It's not about having all the answers.
No, it's about having the conviction that the world, though complex, is not random. It's the ability to see an event as organized and explicable, not just senseless chaos.
So a person with a high degree of comprehensibility, when they're faced with a crisis, they don't panic about the meaning of the universe.
Yeah.
They ask, okay, what are the components of this problem? How does this fit into the patterns of my life?
Exactly. They look for structure and context. The second pillar is manageability. This is the conviction that you possess the necessary resources to cope with life's demands. It's the belief that you can or will be able to handle the situation.
This pillar is essential because it externalizes the responsibility for solving the problem without internalizing the blame for the problem existing.
And it's highly flexible. The resources can be internal, like self-efficacy, learned coping strategies, mental toughness, or they can be external, like social support from a strong network, specialized knowledge, available financial means.
So a person with high manageability says, this is overwhelming, but I know where to look for help, or I know I have the capacity to learn what I need to learn to get through this. They don't freeze.
They begin resource mapping.
And the final, and I would argue most powerful pillar, is meaningfulness.
This is the conviction that life is worthwhile and rewarding, and that finding positive meaning, value, and purpose in challenges is possible.
Meaningfulness provides the fuel.
It does. Comprehensibility and manageability provide the map and the tools, but meaningfulness provides the will to take the journey. It's the deep belief that your struggles are ultimately purposeful, or that the process of struggling is worthwhile because of the growth it necessitates.
So someone with high meaningfulness asks, why is this important for me to overcome? What will this hardship teach me? That's powerful. If you feel you understand the problem, you believe you have the tools to solve it, and you believe the struggle is worthwhile. You've established a really robust psychological defense system against stress.
This triad of beliefs allows for immense flexibility, and we see it in the data. Individuals with a strong SOC are empirically more resilient to stress-related illness and enjoy significantly higher levels of mental and physical health.
That shift in attitude, from external focus to internal perception, is the perfect bridge to discussing what might be the absolute foundation of personal well-being: self-compassion. For a long time, the concept of self-love or self-care has been marred by these associations with narcissism or self-indulgence. We need to clear the air here.
We really do. True self-love is defined as the unconditional acceptance and love of the self. It's not contingent on external success or validation. It is the key to genuine internal satisfaction and offers freedom from the constant, exhausting need for external approval.
And crucially, it's not a fleeting feeling.
It is a conscious decision, a daily stance we take toward ourselves.
And we must aggressively separate this concept from the stereotype of egoism or self-seeking behavior.
The research does this for us. It clearly shows that true self-compassion has no significant association with narcissism.
In fact, narcissism is often correlated with unstable self-esteem.
Exactly. Self-compassion is the opposite. When you genuinely accept and care for yourself, your strengths and flaws in their totality, you are actually more emotionally available to others. Self-love is the act of filling your internal resource tank so you can give to others freely and sustainably.
So if self-love is the stance, then self-compassion is the active mechanism of healing and regulation. It's not just being nice to yourself, it's a complex, multifaceted construct.
Yes, it's defined by three pairs of opposing states, forming a powerful bipolar system. We look at self-compassion as moving along three continua, away from what we call uncompassionate self-responding toward compassionate self-responding, especially in moments of distress or failure.
The first axis is the most direct, and I think perhaps the hardest for high achievers. Self-kindness versus self-judgment.
Most people are far harsher with themselves than they would ever dare to be with a beloved person.
So true.
Self-kindness means actively taking a benevolent, supportive attitude. It means acknowledging your shortcomings, the mistake you made, the performance you botched, while caring for yourself regardless. It's more than just stopping the internal verbal abuse. It's actively showing warmth and concern.
So you stop and ask, this is genuinely difficult right now. What support do I need to care for myself?
Yes. The second axis is common humanity versus isolation.
This addresses that crippling, irrational feeling we get when we fail, where we feel like we are fundamentally broken, the only one who messed up, and that everyone else has their life perfectly together.
That feeling of isolation, of being abnormal or deficient, is what exacerbates suffering and can lock us into shame spirals. Common humanity is the realization, both intellectual and emotional, that suffering, failure, and inadequacy are universal parts of the human experience.
They're inevitable.
They are inevitable components of being alive. By consciously connecting yourself to the shared human condition, you lessen that terrifying sense of disconnection.
It takes the personal shame out of the equation. Failure is simply part of the human operating system, not a flaw unique to you.
Exactly. And the third axis is mindfulness versus over-identification. This is where attention control and emotional regulation become absolutely crucial.
Mindfulness, the idea of balanced awareness, is the foundation.
It is. You have to be willing to turn toward your own pain and acknowledge it mindfully. Balanced awareness means you neither avoid the painful emotions. If you avoid it, you can't respond with compassion, nor do you get swept away by it, which is rumination.
If you over-identify with the pain, you lose perspective.
You do. And that over-identification is the mechanism that takes a temporary event and makes it feel like a permanent, fixed characteristic. Instead of saying, I lost this competition, the mind jumps to, I am a perpetual loser.
That's the danger.
Over-identification exaggerates the implications for your core self-worth. Mindfulness helps us recognize that negative thoughts and feelings are just temporary internal states. They're not objective, permanent truths.
Okay, let's address the biggest piece of skepticism here. High-achieving Western culture values grit, self-criticism, that pull yourself up by your bootstraps mentality. Many people genuinely believe self-criticism is their greatest motivator. So how do we convince someone who fears self-compassion will make them weak or soft that it isn't just letting themselves off the hook?
We convince them with the evidence. The research is overwhelming. Self-compassion makes you strong, not weak. It actually fosters a fiercer, more agentic kind of strength.
So let's start with coping mechanisms. Does self-compassion help us deal with the crisis when it's actually here?
Absolutely. Analysis examining self-compassion and coping shows a strong positive association with adaptive coping strategies like proactive planning, problem-solving, acceptance,
And a negative one with maladaptive strategies.
a large negative association. Things like denial, avoidance, self-medication. Self-compassion is a powerful resource for coping with extreme challenges, trauma, chronic illness, major life crises.
So it's the mechanism that says, I am hurting, and because I care about myself, I must find a way forward, rather than saying, I am hurting, so I deserve to punish myself.
Exactly. There was a powerful study on veterans suggesting that low levels of self-compassion were a stronger predictor of developing debilitating PTSD symptoms than the actual severity of combat exposure itself.
Wow.
It strongly indicates that how you relate to the trauma, whether you treat yourself as an enemy or an ally in recovery, is key.
Okay, now for the motivation question. If I stop calling myself an idiot when I make a mistake, won't I just become lazy?
You won't. The motivation from self-compassion is actually far stronger and healthier than motivation from fear or self-criticism. It stems from self-care and the intrinsic desire for your own well-being, not from the fear of inadequacy.
So self-compassionate people are associated with mastery goals.
Mastery goals, which is the desire to learn and grow, over performance goals, which is just seeking social approval.
So they strive for genuine learning, not just for the gold star.
And that ties directly to mindset. They exhibit a growth mindset, the belief that effort can increase ability. One study found that self-compassionate students, when coached to be self-compassionate after failing a test, spent more time diligently studying for the next test than those who just got a self-esteem boost.
That distinction is profound. Self-compassion facilitates learning from failure. It doesn't result in accepting bad behavior.
No, it actually increases the motivation to take personal responsibility and apologize. They're more motivated to apologize and commit to not repeating harmful behavior because they want better for themselves and their relationships, not because they fear punishment.
Let's really solidify this. We have to address the common confusion between self-compassion and self-esteem because they're fundamentally different. One is stable, one is unstable.
Self-esteem is inherently evaluative. It's based on whether you like or value yourself, often by comparing yourself to others. The core question of self-esteem is always, am I good enough? Am I better than average?
Which makes it highly unstable. It spikes with success and plummets with failure.
And we know the toxic side effects of pursuing high self-esteem at all costs. It's linked to narcissism, defensive aggression, and inability to admit fault.
But self-compassion isn't based on judgment.
Not at all. It is simply a consistent, unconditional way of relating to the ever-changing, imperfect experience of who you are, especially when you fail. It requires no feeling of superiority. It only requires acknowledging the shared and imperfect human condition. This stance is inherently stable.
So, we trade the unstable pedestal of self-esteem for the unwavering stability of self-compassion. And you mentioned the research shows zero link to narcissism.
Zero link. Self-compassionate people are simply less focused on evaluating themselves or defending their viewpoints because their self-worth isn't on the line every time they encounter a challenge.
It's the ultimate antidote to the performance anxiety of the VUCA world.
And beyond the mental game, self-compassion is intrinsically linked to our physical health. It is salutogenesis in action.
Right.
When people genuinely care about themselves, they make the natural choice to care for themselves. It's positively associated with health-promoting behaviors. More physical activity, better diet, reduced smoking, better sleep quality, and it's linked to direct physical benefits like reduced cortisol levels and enhanced immune function.
So it's not just a mental trick. It is literally lowering the body's alarm system and allowing resources to be directed toward health and repair. And this commitment extends outward too, right? For caregivers.
It is a crucial resource for anyone in a caregiving role: therapists, nurses, parents of children with chronic conditions. Studies show self-compassion is linked to greater compassion satisfaction, less burnout, and more functional coping. Far from being selfish, giving yourself compassion provides the emotional energy needed to sustain care for others.
This entire perspective pivots on the idea that self-care is a necessity, a structural requirement for well-being, not a luxury or a reward. Which brings us to the concept of radical self-care.
Radical self-care demands going far beyond the sporadic wellness bath or buying expensive products. It has to be a conscious practice integrated into the fabric of daily life. And this practice requires deep vulnerability and the courage to admit when things are simply too much.
And there's a powerful argument that self-care, in this radical sense, is actually a quiet, profound form of rebellion against societal structures that demand endless productivity.
It is a rebellion against structures that deny personal deservedness. Radical self-care means making the conscious decision. I am deliberately taking this break because I inherently deserve to feel better, not just so I can recharge and perform 20% more afterwards.
That's a huge shift. If the world is telling you your worth is tied to output, taking time for non-productive restoration is fighting for your dignity.
Yes.
So if people are operating at a burnout level, overhauling their life feels impossible. Where do they start with integrating this?
It begins with small daily steps. It has to be sustainable. It might be consciously granting yourself 15 more minutes of sleep without feeling guilt. It might be postponing a demanding task that can genuinely wait. It could be a 10-minute silent walk, or simply allowing yourself to cry to release pent-up stress.
And for the person who sits down to try to be kind to themselves, but just hears that inner critic saying, you don't deserve this break, there's that phenomenal strategy, the pro tip.
Yes, the compassion pro tip. If self-kindness feels difficult, practice the mental shift. Imagine offering that same understanding, patience, and compassion to a beloved person, a close friend, a child who is going through the exact same struggle.
Would you demand perfection from them?
Or would you say, this is a hard time, please take a break and be kind to yourself? That immediate, externalized mental shift often unlocks self-compassion when your internal voice is stuck.
Okay, so once we commit to this radical self-care stance, we can begin to activate the body's wisdom to help regulate our emotional state. This brings us to the fascinating concept of embodiment.
Embodiment is the idea that mental processes aren't just in the skull, they are anchored in the body. Emotions and thoughts are fundamentally physical experiences.
So our posture, our breath, Our physical state can influence our mental state.
Absolutely. We see it in simple examples. An upright, expansive posture fosters feelings of confidence, whereas slumping can induce feelings of lethargy.
But the truly mind-blowing research involves something we do hundreds of times a day without thinking: self-touch.
The research on spontaneous self-touch is profound. It reveals an innate self-soothing mechanism. We unconsciously touch or rub our face somewhere between 400 and 800 times a day.
Wow.
And this self-touch is used unconsciously to refresh short-term memory and, critically, to calm highly elevated emotions. We even see it in fetuses in the womb.
And the frequency increases dramatically when the environment is stressful, which suggests an innate automatic calming mechanism is being activated.
Exactly. The key mechanism is that specialized nerve endings in the skin, called mechanoreceptors, respond to gentle, slow pressure. These receptors connect directly to emotion-regulating centers in the brain, and gentle, slow touch activates them, leading to the release of oxytocin
The bonding and security hormone.
and a direct, measurable reduction in the stress hormone cortisol.
So self-soothing isn't just a psychological trick. It's a direct hormonal and neurological intervention we've been performing since before birth. The body actively calms the alarm system.
And we can consciously leverage this. Simply resting a hand gently over your chest or on your arm in a moment of stress provides a burst of oxytocin. It tells the nervous system you are safe. This leads directly to the actionable techniques used in process and embodiment-focused psychology, or PP.
PP is a therapeutic method that integrates mental, emotional, and physical processes. It utilizes specific techniques like tapping or rubbing, sometimes described as the cranking or Kerbeln exercise, to overcome emotional stress.
The core of the Kerbeln exercise is the deliberate linking of the stress network with the resource network. It's a powerful way to actively update entrenched negative emotional patterns. The physical action involves lightly rubbing what is called the self-affirmation point.
Okay, can you walk us through the location and the process clearly?
Certainly. The self-affirmation point is located just below the left collarbone, usually in the slight indentation between the collarbone and the breastbone. You apply light pressure and gently rub this spot in a slow, clockwise motion.
It can feel a bit tender sometimes.
It can, which indicates the spot is emotionally relevant.
And while you're performing this light physical act, you simultaneously speak a very specific, structured affirmation.
The structure is the secret weapon because it applies the bipolar principle. The affirmation is designed to recognize and acknowledge the emotional burden, the negative pole, while immediately and simultaneously asserting the resource, the positive pole.
So this joint activation is what interrupts the old patterns and lets the brain refocus on its strength.
You are not denying the problem. You are affirming your capacity to handle it.
So we aren't using simple denial-based positive affirmations, which can feel hollow. We're acknowledging the pain and immediately linking it to a source of strength. Can you give us some detailed examples?
Let's look at the three core emotional needs this exercise targets: security orientation, autonomy, and self-relationship.
Okay.
For security and orientation, which addresses safety and fear, the affirmation is designed to anchor you in stability. If the burden is anxiety about a difficult meeting, you would affirm, "Even though I have this overwhelming fear about the outcome of the meeting, I remain in safety and keep the overview."
That immediately links the emotional panic to the rational executive function. What about autonomy, that feeling of control, especially when we feel controlled by VUCA forces?
For autonomy, the affirmation asserts sovereignty. If your burden is feeling drained by constant external demands, you would say, "Even though I feel overwhelmed and drained by others' demands, I determine what is truly good for me and I remain sovereign on my path."
That's a quiet rebellion against the productivity mandate, anchored by a physical gesture of self-care.
It is.
And finally, for self-relationship. This is where self-judgment and competence amnesia hit hardest.
For self-relationship, you challenge the deepest core narratives. If your burden is self-criticism from a recent failure, you would use this affirmation. "Even though I made a significant mistake and don't feel good enough right now, I love and accept myself just as I am."
The beauty of this process is that it's not about tapping the bad emotion away. It's about integrating the ambivalence, acknowledging the reality of the struggle, while affirming the reality of the resource within you.
By linking the burden network with the resource network, you create a new connection in the brain. The constant influx of stimuli, touch, sound, structured thought irritates the brain in a positive way that allows old restrictive patterns to be reevaluated and positively influenced.
So we've established that our inner resources are both innate, built into our physical wiring, and profoundly learnable. We know that high stress knocks our rational brain offline, leading to that competence amnesia, but we have these concrete, embodied techniques, from conscious self-touch to the curb-on exercise, to restore our connection to our strength.
The knowledge of how the mind and body interact, how a gentle rub of the skin can release oxytocin and quiet cortisol, is perhaps the greatest resource we possess for navigating the VUCA world. We move away from seeking validation and stability in the unstable external world of achievements and comparisons, and instead focus on fortifying the unconditional refuge within ourselves.
So what stands out to you? For us, the path to inner freedom isn't paved with external achievements or that unstable pedestal of self-esteem, but with the consistent, conscious, daily choice of radical self-acceptance. We trade comparison and valuation for the unwavering stability of self-compassion. And this resource, unlike external accomplishments, literally gets better with age.
That's a critical point. Research shows that people tend to become significantly more self-compassionate as they age. And this self-compassion actually peaks later in life, often around the age of 77.
Wow.
The increasing wisdom, emotional stability, and general life satisfaction experienced by the elderly are believed to be bidirectionally linked to this rising self-compassion. They stop fighting themselves and simply accept their humanity.
So if increasing wisdom and life satisfaction are linked to cultivating self-compassion, what tiny daily act of radical self-care, that small postponement, that quiet walk, that conscious placement of a hand on your chest, or that one moment of a verbal affirmation, could you commit to now that would allow you to start cultivating that 77-year-old self's powerful wisdom today? We'll leave you with that thought.